go first, kind of remind ourselves where we're at. This was lesson number 7. Sometimes the enemy scores a victory. Here we go, Ezra chapter 4. So remember, there was a king that started to send the people back. The people by the thousands are heading back. But the people in the land of where Israel was, they're not happy about it. Because Israel had been a powerful nation. They had overtaken the area and everybody was in fear of them. So now they're starting to come back and the local residents are like, I don't like this idea. I don't want these guys coming back. They're troublemakers and their God is a bit troublesome. And so as they start to rebuild the temple and they're trying to lay the foundation, there are some people that aren't very happy about it. And that's what we started to read about. Ezra chapter 4 and verse 18. Let's remind ourselves about the things that they were saying. They're sending a letter to the local king and says, this letter you sent us has been read and translated in my presence, and I issued an order and a search was made, and it was found that this city has a long history of a revolt against kings and has been a place of rebellion and sedition. Jerusalem has had powerful kings rolling over the whole Trans-Euphrates, and taxes and tributes and duty were paid to them. Boy, I don't like the sound of that. They're kind of troublesome. And so it goes on, be careful not to neglect this matter as the threats grow. As soon as the copy of the letter was given to the king and read, here's what happens. They went immediately to the Jews in Jerusalem and compelled them by force to stop. What? Wait a minute now. God spoke to the heart of a king who let them start to come back, and he gave them supplies and money to be able to do it. So you see the hand of the Lord in it, so you would think each step of the way it would be just doors flying open, everything would go smoothly. Now they get back, they have the money that they need, they have the supplies that they need, but in the midst of that, all of a sudden, the work not only grinds to a halt, but it says they forced them to stop working. We look at it, what's going on? How's that possible? There's a reality today that this warfare that we're involved in between us and the forces of Satan, it is very real, and sometimes, as we see here in the scripture, sometimes they score a victory. I've been following down in Ohio. You realize that this transgender debate is raging, and it's really found its way into the public school system. We've kind of touched on this here and there. And so there was some rulings going on for a while that a transgender student could go to the bathroom of whatever gender they identify as. And so the state of Ohio didn't like that, and so they voted for their public schools that students had to go and use the bathroom of the gender in which they were born. People didn't like that. They sued. It made it all the way to the Ohio State Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court overruled it and said children could go to whatever bathrooms they identified with. Ohio appeals. It makes it all the way to the Supreme Court, and we're thinking, Supreme Court sounds pretty conservative right now. They're going to respond to this, and it's going to be, kids got to go to the bathroom of the gender they were born with. It gets to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, as you know, has a couple options. They agree to hear the case and make a decision on it. If they say, I'm not going to hear it, then it just goes back to the last ruling, which would have been the Ohio Supreme Court, and the federal Supreme Court said they weren't going to hear the case. So it stands. So now, Ohio public schools, children can choose to use whatever bathroom they want to identify with. That's a big victory for those that are pursuing those agendas. And you see that and you go, what's going on? How come those kind of victories happen? What do we do when in Ezra 4:23 happens? What we have to do is we have to spend some time, and I know, excuse me, throat a little dry there. I know sometimes we don't like to hear this word, but we're going to dip into it today. We are going to take a theology break. Don't get worried. Theology isn't a bad thing. Theology just means we're going to dig a little deeper and find out what does the Bible say about our God and these moments that happen, because I think what happens when the enemy scores a victory, we get a little bit confused. Well, the Bible tells us what do we do when those moments happen. Let's look at a couple of them. When the enemy wins a battle, let's go over to Psalm chapter 56. So it happened in the book of Ezra. The same thing is going to be tried in the book of Nehemiah. The enemies are going to try to stop the building of the walls. We saw it in our study of the book of Acts. I mean, how many times the disciples would come into a new town, Satan would stir up the crowds. Sometimes they'd throw the disciples out of the city. Remember the time they stoned Paul and left him for dead? The opposition does score victories. And when it does, boy, we got to go to these passages, because I'm going to make a little confession. I'm the kind of guy, when it happens, I'm like, what's going on? I like to see it when God scores victory after victory after victory. But Satan has been allowed to rule and roam on this earth, and he does score victories. So what do? Let's see what Psalm chapter 56 tells us we should do in the midst of these moments when it happens. And you're going to have to get this stuff, because not often does God choose to explain to us why these victories happen. Because the scripture already tells us what it is that we're supposed to do when it does. Here's one of them, 56, verses 3 and 4. Let's back up a little bit and kind of set the stage here. David talking, he says, "Be merciful to me, O God, for men hotly pursue me. All day long they press their attack. My slanders pursue me all day long. Many are attacking me in their pride." A lot of these psalms that David writes are about this ongoing battle, really for his own survival. If you know the story well, Saul is the king, but Saul didn't have a very consistent relationship with God. So David is anointed to be king even while Saul is still in office. Saul and David have a close relationship for a while, but then Saul begins to get jealous of David. Anybody remember why? David was a very good warrior. He would come into the city, and what would they say? Saul has killed his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. Well, you're the king, and you get wind of that going on in the city square, and you're not happy about it. So he kind of makes a decree. I've had enough of David. Let's get rid of him. And so this starts a multi-year campaign of David on the run for his life. And you'll read these different psalms where he's crying out, "God, please. He anointed me king, and I'm on the run." And the reason it's so interesting for us is that David constantly cries out, but God doesn't deliver him immediately. Now, we know the whole story. We know eventually he's going to be crowned king and really bring Israel back together as a powerful nation. But it doesn't happen the minute he cries out. And that's what's happening here. It's another one of these psalms where he's saying, "Men are hotly pursuing me. Lord, where are you? You anointed me king, and yet I'm on the run? I don't understand." So what do you do when you're at that place? The enemy is scoring victories. The newly anointed king-to-be is running from rock to rock, afraid for his life. They're hotly pursuing me. What he does is listed for us here in verses 3 and 4, and this is what we do. When God chooses not to intercede and the enemy scores a victory, during those moments when we're wondering what's going on, here's what we do. When I am afraid, I will trust in you. In God, whose word I praise, in God I trust. I will not be afraid. What can mortal man do to me? My friends, when these things happen, when victories occur that leave us speechless, it's honestly surprising to me that the Supreme Court wouldn't take up a case like this. This transgender issue is such a hot button topic, I would have thought they would have jumped right on it, but they didn't. So what do? I have to trust in him. I have to believe that he is in control of all things, and I hope you believe it. Now, how do you deepen your faith in that? Well, you got to spend more time in this book because you'll be able to see his hand at work. I'm going to help you because as we go through this today, as we move from Titus chapter 4, you're going to see God's hand at work. And guess what? The temple is going to get built. But during that period, we have to trust. Let's go to Psalm chapter 143. And these are especially true if you're like me, because I get mystified sometimes. I'm the kind of guy, maybe you're that too. Let's see, it's 11:44 right now. I'm the type of guy that if I start praying to God at 11:44, do you know when I want an answer? 11:45, I'll take that, right? Maybe 46 if he's busy doing something else. And it doesn't work that way. God has his own agenda. Things are moving and pieces are falling into place because of a plan that he has. You know, from the Garden of Eden, life has been set into motion. And it's heading towards a conclusion that the book of Revelation gives us glimpses about. Sometimes life just takes its course. You know, we kid all the time when things happen to us. It's like, for example, I got a new doctor and I had a blood test a couple weeks ago. And it came back. And now, you know, doctors don't call you now anymore. You got this little thing on your phone. Mine's called MyChart, and all your test results come up. And then the doctor responds, and she says, well, boy, your cholesterol's too high, your triglycerides are too high, your blood pressure's too high. And, you know, the list just goes on and on. And it'd be easy for me to say, Lord, where are you in the midst of this? Why aren't you doing something for me? And then I go to Five Guys and I eat a large order of their greasy fries. Right? I mean, life is set into motion, and sometimes we blame God for the things that are happening, and a lot of it is our own choice. Now, sometimes in the midst of our own silliness and the bad choices that we make, God chooses to intercede because it's something that's a part of his plan. But sometimes life just moves along, set in motion way back in the Garden of Eden. But whenever those things that are set into motion get us surprised or stunned, we trust. Psalm 143 and verse 8 tells us the same thing. Let the morning bring me word. Sometimes I get to these Psalms and they're so good I just can't read one verse. I apologize. Somebody said that to me a while ago. Why do you just put up one verse and then you read 7? I'm sorry. That's the verse I want, and then I look at it, and it's just the stuff is too good. I have to back up a little bit, and that's what we're going to do here. Let's back up to verse 5. I remember the days, this is David once again, of long ago. I meditate on all your works and consider what your hands have done. This is a Bible theme. When the enemy scores a victory, when you are kind of confused about what's happening, one of the things that the scripture suggests that we do is remind ourselves of the works of his hands. From the Red Sea on forward, countless times the nation of Israel talks about the Red Sea. Why? Because it is a reminder of the works of his hands. You and I have the same thing. Moments where God has done incredible stuff for us. Miracles that clearly were his hand protecting us. So we remember those things, and then it encourages us to get through the times of difficulty. That's what he's saying here. I remember the days of long ago. I'm going to meditate on your works and consider what your hands have done. I spread out my hands to you. My soul thirsts for you like a parched land. That's how much we need him. Answer me quickly, O Lord. My spirit fails. We've all been there. Crying out to him, Lord, I need your help desperately. Do not hide your face from me, or I will be like those who go down to the pit. Lord, let the morning bring me word of your unfailing love, for I have put my trust in you. And in the midst of those moments when the enemy's winning, show me the way that I should go, for I lift up my soul. Now, did David write these wonderful words because he's finally found relief from his enemies? And they're leaving him alone and he's walking victoriously? That's why he's saying trust in him? Look at the next verse. Oh, by the way, rescue me from my enemies, for I hide myself in you. That plea that he's been laying out for 100 Psalms or so, please rescue me, still hasn't been answered. But he's giving us an example of what we do when times are dark, or let's put it like this, when times are confusing. God, where are you in the midst of this? David says, I'm going to trust in you.